Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rigging for Animators workshop. So, I'm Bo Pratt from Animation Mentor. Animation Mentor is an online school that specializes specifically in 3D character and game animation. I'm going to be here helping out and just kind of helping facilitate the questions and whatnot. And in this live workshop, we have two segments for you. The first one is going to be the rigging for animators, as the name suggests, with Chris Nelder, who will be going over some really cool stuff on rigging and how that applies to us as animators and how we can get into rigging. And secondly, we have a talk with Animation Mentor's student success team, Tim and Mars, who will be going over Animation Mentor and answering any questions that you might have about the school and its programs. So, without further ado and without me yammering on too long, I'll just pass it off to Chris here and let him take it away.
All right. Thank you, Bo. I'm gonna share screen. So yeah, rigging for animators. So this is kind of my pitch to why I think more animators should go into rigging. My background, I started off as an animator. I knew I wanted to be an animator for a very long time. Finally managed to get a job in animation in the early 2000s and got the opportunity to move into rigging. And it was never something I wanted to do. When I learned it in school, it was not the fun part. It was very tedious. It was very technical. And when I actually properly learned rigging, I learned to love it. And I even got a chance to go back into animation after doing rigging for about a year. And I suddenly found it was like a superpower that I was able to take very technical shots that would have been an absolute nightmare for me. And they became the easy shots. And then I could focus much more on the performance and the acting. And also in the rigging for animators, when I moved into rigging, I found because I had been an animator and I knew animation, then I was really rigging for the animators, designing controls, setting things up. I knew how I might want to animate it, and then I could put in the controls for animators to use it. And my career path took me from animator into rigger, eventually into a rigging TD, designing rigging systems, building them, and eventually fully into programming and software and building pipelines for studios. So, uh, a bit about my company. So, I'm the founder and CEO for Twisted Mountain Animation. We've been around since 2017 and have grown to, I think we're about 40 people right now. We've worked on about 200 different projects. We brand ourselves as your partners in production because we often are partnering with other studios around the world. And we are a full service studio. We do everything. And we're often problem solvers that dive into challenging projects. And that eventually led us to working with Animation Mentor, where they brought us on to create the Tina rig. So we worked closely with Animation Mentor, a lot of back and forth, meeting regularly, trying to dial things in, get things just right for the animators. So getting into rigging, first, we kind of need to start with what is a rig. I'm going to probably use a lot of terms that might be very familiar to someone who is in rigging, who is in animation, but for other people, they just might sound like jargon. So when I'm talking about a rig, I'm mostly going to be talking about when you have some sort of controls or setup to drive your animation. So with a rig, we start with the model, but that's basically a block of clay. It's not going to move. The computer doesn't know what's an arm, what's a hand. So we have to put in a skeleton and we add in, we paint skin weights, which that controls the deformation of how the elbow bends, how that all moves nicely. Uh, but then for the animators, they're not going to want to use the joints directly. So we build these layers of controls, and this looks very complicated because I have every control turned on the rig. Generally, you'll see it with much fewer controls. So you start with the main controls and sort of work your way down into smaller tweak controls as you go along. Uh, and this is much like there's sort of the part under the hood, and then there's the interface that you're interacting with. So sort of think about it like if you're in a car, your interface is just steering wheel, gas pedal, brake, maybe you're shifting. Uh, Those are the controls we design for animators, and we try and make it so it's intuitive, so the animator can grab that rig, instantly start working with it and animating. Uh, Rigging, oftentimes people think that it's very technical and you have to be a super technical person to go into it. And a lot of my time spent training new riggers has been actually teaching the artistic side of it. And me coming from the art side of it, doing life drawing, very helpful for me going into rigging, knowing how something should actually deform, understanding anatomy. Uh, if you know posing, then you know, okay, I'm trying to get this really nice pose out of a character. I need to rig it in a way that's it's going to support that. If you're coming purely from the technical, a lot of technical people they can do the technical parts of it, but might fall short on the artistic side to get something that moves really nice. And for an animator, that's just so important when you get a rig that's done right. It seems like every pose you do just sort of falls into place. Uh, so if you're not a technical person, it still can be a really good thing to get into. So I'm hoping to sort of demystify a little bit of rigging, take away those barriers. I know I had those mental blocks of I'm never going to be a rigger. I'm an animator. Rigging is beyond me. And then eventually I got into rigging, found I really loved it. There's so many different parts to it. Sometimes you're not always in a creative mindset, and then I can just sort of chip away at naming things. And then the skinning part, blend shapes, that's where you really get into a more artistic side of it of with the deformation of of a of a character. Uh, then as you sort of move along the path into more of a rigging TD, and that's someone who might learn or is going to know some scripting, Mel or Python. They're going to be more the ones who design the rigging setups versus a rigger might be already using a pre-existing rigging system. They might not know how any of that stuff really works under the hood, but they know how to set up a rigging system and then create a really good rig out of it. Uh, so I'm going to try and nudge people along this path, remove some of those barriers that you get into rigging a little bit, and maybe some people might actually want to go further down that path. And then on the creative side of rigging, because coming from animation, I felt like I wouldn't be creatively fulfilled doing rigging, but I actually found it really creatively fulfilling because it's so much problem solving, and you're designing things, you're inventing things, you're coming up with new setups. Sometimes you learn this little new piece, and you've known about this other thing, you can combine it in interesting ways, and it's just constant discovery, constant learning. I've been rigging in Maya since 2003, and there's still stuff for me to learn. It's rigging is such a deep topic, and you don't have to go too deep before you can get the benefit of it. You can sort of start slow, learn over the course of time. And for me, it's been a really fun process and has opened a lot of doors. So getting into more practical things for animators that you can actually use straight away. I'm going to go through creating a simple prop rig, talk a bit about constraints, because I think early on learning rigging and even just for animators, constraints are so important. If you know how to use constraints, if you understand constraints, there's so much that you can do with that. Then I'm going to talk about a bit about designing controls, the process we went through with Tina to try and get it right, so it had a really good feel for an animator using it, and then skinning tips. Skinning is often something that once people hit that point in learning rigging, that they tend to get some frustration with it. So hopefully I can show some good tips to get you over that hurdle. Skinning is actually one of my favorite parts of rigging a character. It's sort of a soothing, relaxing thing that you can do. I think a lot of people find the same experience from animating, playing with curves and just getting the motion right. So I'm going to start with showing a simple prop rig. Just going to jump into rigging a baseball bat, showing a simple hierarchy and set up with 3 layers of controls. So here is a baseball bat. And this is kind of a typical hierarchy setup. I like to keep things very clean and organized. And when you're rigging, you kind of learn to be a bit OCD about keeping things clean as you go. It just pays off. So I like to separate geometry into its own group, the skeleton, and the controls, which when I'm saying controls, it's just any of these. I just use NURBS curves for controls. So this setup, I just have a single joint, and that is constrained to this control. So this control is driving that through this constraint. And then with the parenting hierarchy, it all works down the chain. So I'm going to just strip this back and show creating this from scratch. So I'm going to set up my groups. I need to create a joint, and I'm just going to move that joint to origin, should be in that main joint, group that one, skeleton, and now I need a control. So I'm just going to create NURBS primitive, circle, square. I'll just scale this up. It's got some history on it. I'm just going to delete history, and I'm going to freeze transforms on this. So I'm going to just call this sort of one control. Just going to duplicate this, give myself 3 layers of controls, and I'll go into why I generally like to have 3 layers of controls. And because I've got transforms left on here, I'm just going to freeze those transforms again, so everything is nice and clean. I'll group this again under a control group, move that under my master. So now I've got most of my setup, but I need to drive this joint. So if I select this inner control, select the joint, constraint, parent constraint, go to the option box, and most of the time, this is the only setting I'm going to play around with for parent constraint. Maintain offset. If I have, I'm just going to move this away. If I have maintain offset turned off, then it's not going to maintain the offset between these. So I'll apply that. You can see it snaps it over to here. Or if I have that turned on and hit apply, it keeps that distance. I'm just going to move this. In this case, because they're at the exact same pivot, this actually doesn't matter either way, but I'm going to add that parent constraint. So now when I move this control here, it is moving my skeleton. And now I'm just going to select my joint, select my mesh, go to skin, and bind skin. So there we go. In a few minutes, I already have a simple prop rig. So by having multiple layers of controls, there's a few things I can do with that. I might constrain the top one to a hand and then have another one that's free to still move it around. If I want to offset where a character is holding it, I can use these to offset that way. Or I could even do something like if I want it to have the bat stood up on its end, I can flip this inner one around, move that up, and now I've got a nice pivot at the bottom. And I'll show another example of that with this car along a track. So this might be a common thing that you run into where I've got this vehicle on track and I want it to kind of fishtail out right here. but my pivot is right in the middle of the car, and that's not where the car is going to pivot. It's going to pivot from the front wheels, but in the rig, I haven't been given a pivot for that. So I can use this inner control to offset my car. And now I've got a pivot that makes more sense. So I'll just key it here. I want to kind of swing out around here, and then I can have it overcorrect a little bit and straighten out. So there we go. Got a little bit of fishtailing. So even though I didn't have that pivot to start with, because I've got the 3 layers of controls, it gives me some nice options. Well, I'm going to jump into, once you've got your prop set up and you have your character needing to interact with it, now you need to start constraining between 2 different assets. So that's where you get into in-scene constraint rigs. So I'll show you with sort of your basic starting point. If I have a sword, so in this case, I have my sword rig and I've got a constraint on it, and that is constrained to my hand. So when I move the hand, the sword moves with the hand. In this case, it makes sense. I might want to set it up this way so that I can use the IKFK in the arms and I can get nice arcs with the arm moving. But if I get into a situation that's a little bit more complicated, so in this case, maybe I have a shot where the character stabs at something, the sword gets stuck, and I want him to kind of wiggle that sword. And I've done this in a different way where I actually wanted the sword to drive the hand. So I've constrained the hand to the sword. And any offset control that I use on here, it's getting passed on to the hand. But if I want the character to stab this thing and then get it stuck, I don't really have a pivot yet for here. So I'm going to actually use a locator. So create a locator, and this could also be a group. I just need something to give me a new pivot. So with constraints, it's really gives you new pivot options. So I want it to rotate from here. So I can take this locator and I'm just going to add a constraint onto this top control for the sword. And I'm going to parent constraint with maintain offset turned on so it doesn't move the sword. And now very easily with a locator and a constraint, I can animate this very easily. So take it a little bit further. If you have a character trying to draw on a piece of paper or they're writing, how do you have the character holding a pad, holding a piece of paper, and then writing? That's a very complex thing to do. But I'm going to show you a setup that makes that much easier. And it's really designing what's going to be driving what. And if you plan ahead a little bit, you can make things a lot easier. So in this case, what I want to do was have the pen driving the hand. So with the multiple layers of controls, I'm going to use this inner control to get my rotation. I'm going to get this next layer of control to move along the surface. And because I have this matched to the surface, I can, in just 2 axes, control this. So I could have the character riding along here and get a little bit of extra rotation. And I've attached, the pen is a separate asset. but I have a constraint on this, so I've constrained it to the piece of paper. So if I move the paper around, there we go. If I move the paper around, then the pen stays stuck to it. And I've set it so that this hand is actually driving it. So I can get some really nice animation very easily with just use this hand to move it around, use this control to write it, and another one to get a little bit of rotation. I'm getting a little bit more complex again, or sort of overcoming limitations. If I open up this box, this is a pretty common rig setup that you might get. You've got a box, you're animating it, but you've only got one control. I can't move an inner control to get an offset on this. And if I want to have this box roll away, I can't do this with this one control. If I'm animating it, it's going to take uh, absolutely forever. So what I can do is create another locator. I'm going to snap that over to this side. So now I've got the pivot I want, and I'm going to add a constraint. So that works that way. But if I want it to rotate the other direction, it doesn't work. So I'm going to create another locator. So I could constrain this so that I've got multiple constraints driving this box. But then I got to deal with switching between which is the driver constraint. So it's much easier for me to actually just take my first locator and parent it underneath the second one. So I'm setting up my own layer of controls. So now if the box needs to rock this way, so I can just rock it that way, bring it back, and rock it the other way. Want to go even crazier with this. I have set up a series of locators that are all just parented underneath each other like an FK chain. And I've animated this, so I've actually got my box rolling through. And to make this even easier for myself, so I don't always create locators. I generally will set the first one as a locator, and then afterwards I like to use groups. So I've got this first one I'm rolling. If I want to get that second roll, I can select my locator and just Control G, create a new group. If I hold down the D key, that allows me to move a pivot. Hold D and V to vertex snap the pivot. So now I've moved my pivot to the next spot that I need it. So as that goes down, I can key my group, go to the next one, rotate that 90 degrees, and I can take this and I can group this as many times as I want and just repeat this pattern of hold down D and V, key that, and rotate that 90 degrees. And if I wanted it to suddenly change direction, I can group it again, snap it to the side here, key that, go a different direction. So I've taken a very complex shot that would be pretty much impossible. And in a few minutes, now I've got this box rolling around just from a few simple things of knowing how to use constraints and pivots. So getting a little bit more into actual rigging, joint placement, knowing anatomy, knowing that when you point your foot, it goes straight. You do not get a bend in it. It becomes obvious that this is not what you're looking for. This is nice deformation. So I'm going to show a good way of understanding how to find the right joint placement. So this something I see pretty common joint placements. You look, that's the end of the leg. This is where the foot starts. That's where my joint goes. Similarly, people will put the finger joints where you see the little crease, but the joint is actually much further in. Uh, so I've set this up with, it's already skinned. So I put this joint where I see it quite often. When I bend it, no matter what I do, I'm going to get this sort of ugly lump in here. So the way that I find the correct placement for a joint, I'm looking at, especially with the the, the foot and the ankle. This is kind of, if you ever take wire and bend it, you try and unbend it, you end up with sort of crinkly wire. You have to find that exact perfect bend spot to unbend it. And what I'm trying to find is where is that sweet spot to unbend this bend. So I look at what is this angle. So in this case, it's pretty much 90 degrees. Down here, this is about 30 degrees. So I've got this line right in the middle at 60 degrees. So it's just half of this. So I don't normally put controls in here and do it. I'll usually do this by eye. I just go, okay, it's bent like this. What's sort of the halfway to split that angle? And then I know that I can slice it through there. So I've placed my joint somewhat around that area. And because I know that I want to sort of keep it in the middle of the foot, so I found the spot in the middle of the foot that was still on that path. So when I rotate this, I actually get a nice straight line. So to kind of further demonstrate why this works so well, uh, I've got this joint that's right here, exactly where that bend happens. So I know if I rotate this, that that front line stays straight. And ignore the back piece. I've just, as an example, showed sort of a mangled bit of geometry back here, but what I really want is to make sure this is straight. And I've got a group in here so I can move this pivot around. So if I have a pivot anywhere along this line, when I rotate this, I'm going to get to perfectly straight. And you can see that I rotate it to 120. If I move this in closer and I rotate it to 120, you can see it goes straight. And I can move it really far away and it'll stretch it out a lot more, but it still goes perfectly straight. But if I take this and I move it off of that line and I rotate it, then you can see I I get this crinkling bend that I don't want. So as long as you keep it on this line that's halfway through, you know you're going to be able to straighten out that line. Uh, and each of the joint placements, it's always trying to find sweet spots. I've got lots of sort of little tips and tricks of how I found good joint placements for shoulders are quite difficult. Find the right spot for the hips. And a lot of that, it's, you got to sort of just try it out. But here's a good tip for finding the right joint placement. Uh, so getting into designing controls, this is always a really fun thing. And when you hand a rig to an animator, seeing how they use it and seeing which controls they find first, which ones they're using, uh, what the sort of tools we have at our disposal is the colors, the shapes, the sizes. I tend to, for something I want to move in just two axes, I'll use squares. If I want it to be something that you generally rotate around, I'll use circles or spheres. For IK, I tend to use more um, squares or octagons. Uh, and then for colors, there's the general standard of right side being red, left side being blue. So in our rigs, we have that same standard. And then down the middle, we usually use purple and yellow. Um, and this is just showing a lot of the iterations that we went through back and forth on the colors of our controls on Tina, how dense things were in the face, all the different hair controls. Uh, and you can always tweak these. It's very much a to taste kind of thing. But I'm going to jump into, just open up this ball. So with this being curve shape, then I look at it and I think I'm going to rotate that around. I can move this, but this has an additional attribute for a squash. Seeing this being square, I immediately want to translate that. And this being a sphere, I'm going to rotate this around. So try and make this as intuitive as possible for an animator. And this is definitely a much more complicated setup. This is using lattices and clusters, uh, which is just sort of another thing that once you learn how to use those, it sort of opens up a lot more possibilities of deforming a rig. I'm just going to open up Tina. Uh, And I'm just going to talk about her face control. So uh, I guess also this was something that we worked with Animation Mentor to find a nice way of setting this up. There's a lot of controls for visibility, toggling to turn on and off all the different layers of things, micro controls. So if you were to try and work with it this way, it's just a little bit too daunting. So when you first open up a rig, we have most of these hidden. And then as you're working, you can turn on the facial controls. And if you need to get some of the offset controls and then second layers of controls to do additional tweaking, you can turn those on. Uh, so with how we've designed our controls, we try and do it so that the larger a control is, the more area it's going to control, and we'll also pull it a little bit further away. You need to be able to select these so you can see this one being further out and a little bit bigger. You can assume that it's driving the controls underneath. And if I turn on the micro controls, you can see those are even closer to the surface. So you can assume that this is going to control it till you get down to that finer level. These ones being cubes, I'm immediately going to translate these around. And sometimes we can't really use hard and fast rules. It's like I just need a different shape to help indicate that this is the brow versus some other area. Uh, and it's something I find really fun, especially with working with props and trying new things, that playing around with getting something that if you get it right, someone picks it up and they immediately know how to use it. So skinning. I'm going to go through a few tips that I have for skinning. It's definitely seems to be the thing when I talk to people about rigging. This comes up the most as the thing that people do not like doing. They start doing it and they get really frustrated. And if you don't know some of these basics, then it can be very frustrating skinning. You can spend all kinds of hours, and it seems to be like every time you do something, it breaks another thing. So one of the most important things, uh, working with just two joints at a time. I'm going to open up this example here. And these haven't been skinned yet, so I'm actually going to show skinning these. So if I have an arm, I've got all these joints, and I bind that. So this is giving me something very soft and squishy, And one of my points here is avoid U shapes. And immediately you can see this is a pretty significant U shape. Uh, what you want to get is your, seem to let me draw on the screen with my pen. I'll just have to use a mouse. Uh, so ideally, you're getting either two curved shapes or you're getting a straight and a curve, and you want to avoid any curving in shapes. Uh, you'll you'll hear people talk about preserving volume when skinning, and we're not really good at seeing volume as actual three-dimensional space. We only really understand volume in seeing it from the outside. So the best way to make something look like it's maintaining volume in the rig is to control the silhouette. So if you see things bulging out, then it's preserving volume. And if you've done drawing classes and life drawing classes, and a lot of this still applies to rigging. Uh, one of the things that I ask people in interviews when I'm hiring new riggers, if they've done life drawing, and then I always want to see their life drawing. Uh, do this. So, and this is a very simple example of completely straight. All the edge loops on this are perpendicular to the joint, so this is going to be an easy one. Oftentimes you have topology that wraps around and can be much more complicated. But to just show at least at this level, so I am going to open up the so I'm used to using my own tools. I forgot how to get to the paint skin weights. Uh, there we go. So I've just done default weighting on this. And first thing I'm going to do is flood it all to one joint. So I want to have full control over what's happening with this influence. Anytime I'm working on a character, I'll flood it back to the hips or whatever top level. In this case, I'm really just going to show between the upper arm and the lower arm. So to work with two joints at a time, because if I start grabbing some influence, and if I paint this, and then I can, maybe I just want to smooth this into here. If I'm smoothing or smoothing with this one, it might look like it's doing the right thing, but it could also be throwing influence. And you see it might be very hard over zoom, but there's little faint influences that are going onto these other joints. So if I move this hand, I'm getting this wiggling. And that's something that drives people insane because they're like, oh, I move the hand and there's a stray joint that just keeps flying around. So the way to avoid that, I'm going to flood this all here. I can select both these, and you can either just click these locks to lock that influence, or what I do just constantly is I'll select the ones I want to work with and I'll lock inverse selection. So now I know that no stray influences will go into any other joints. So now I can flood this. So if I bend this now, I know it's going to the right influences. But this, of course, isn't looking very good. So I need to start smoothing this out. So I'm going to, I select edge loops and then holding control and right click, you can get to the hotbox to two vertices. You might see me just do this as one flick where I do it like that to switch over to vertices so I can get back into painting. And now I can start smoothing this out. So because this is completely even, I know if I flood this and smooth it, it's going to be in the right spot. And I want to hold this. So I know that I'm happy with this. I don't want to change this influence. So I want to start smoothing it one direction or the other. So Uh, I'm not, I know we're kind of running short on time, so I'm going to try and get through this pretty quickly. So I will always want to smooth to add influence. So I want to, instead of subtracting influence by smoothing this way, I want to be using from this joint, I'm going to smooth in this direction. And that's going to give me more predictable results. So I can smooth that way, and I don't want to affect my middle edge, and I will smooth that way. So pretty quickly, I've got something that's working a lot better, and I can make this even better. So I'm seeing that when this goes in, I'm not quite happy with this shape because it kind of feels more, it's kind of not rounded enough. So I can take these and then I'll get into some fine tuning. So I can add just a very small value, 0.01. And now that feels like a nicer shape to me. You can really see how this one is just kind of pushed in a little bit. So then just nudge that out, very small value, and that's going to give me a nicer deformation. Uh, I'm going to skip over this. I was just going to show an example if it's a thicker one. So in this case, this was split 50-50, but if the upper part is actually larger, then this midpoint would be more pushed down. So I'd find that midpoint, I'd push it a little bit more. Uh, and I just want to go jump into, once you get into really advanced, so way down the path, and this is the direction my career has taken, you get into tool development and building rigging systems, and that can start from very simple things. Even uh, the ball example that I opened up, this one could be done with an auto rigger. I built a lot of assets because you can sort of do rapid prototyping with it. If you can start to learn a little bit of programming, you can set up really simple constraints, even the like the baseball bat example, just starting with like, I'm doing that over and over again. I just need a basic prop rig. If you can learn to create controls, create a bit of a rigging system, and that's sort of how it starts. And eventually can go to what we have is a very advanced rigging system. So this is the skeleton out of Tina. And this is, we have a guide and build system. So the way we've designed this is every component, we can bring in a guide and place it in here. And I'm just going to open up our guides tool. So I can even add in a hand. And I could start fitting that to a character. So I would start with a mesh and then start putting in all my guides and placing it. I can delete these components. I can mirror them across. So for our riggers working at TMA, they don't need to learn how to build all these things. A lot of things gets automated, and most studios will have either their own rigging system or be using something that they've licensed or is free. I'm just going to build a test out of this, and I'm going to keep viewport enabled. So this is running through and figuring out one component at a time and actually taking my guide and replacing it with the full rig. And this is something this rig system took years to build out, but the early versions of this were basically just snippets of code that would automate some part of it, and that sort of got stitched together and built over time. So this very quickly has now actually built a final rig that I could do control fitting on, do the skinning, and ours is built so we can save out control fitting, save out skin weights. I could actually use Tina and load in our existing control fitting, just going to snap it to her fitted controls. So I know we're out of time at this point, so I'm going to stop sharing if I can find the stop share. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome. That was a tidal wave of awesome information. Definitely something worth rewatching and really diving deep, especially the rig setup you showed early on with the baseball bat. That is such a simple rig system. Nothing simple in animation. Uh, but once you understand that triple level of controls, that opens up the world of props in so many ways. And then when you start adding on, like you were showing with that cube, and how easy, once you understand the hierarchies and the levels, how easy it is to take something that would be mind-numbingly complex and tedious to animate, and poof, you're done, and it looks good and it works fantastic. It is amazing.
And it's so fun to find those things when it's just
Yeah.
like, oh, how can I do this? This is a fun little problem, and it becomes enjoyable rather than a completely daunting task to tackle those kind of
Hmm.
animation scenes.
So we do have quite a few questions here. We might need to do a quick fire round. We'll see how it goes to try and get as many of these in because there's some really good ones here. Um, so one of the biggest questions we've gotten through here is just regarding rigging setups. So you're using Maya. There's also Blender, there's Unreal. Are the things that you showed here kind of universal ideas that can be applied to any program, or is rigging one of those situations where every single program is completely different from each other?
There's definitely transferable skills. I mean, if you know how an arm deforms, if you know that you want your straight and your curve, then figuring out how to deform that, it's 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 really going like, I know what I need to do. Now I need to know how to do this in this piece of software. Designing of controls, designing any UI, UX, these are all transferable. Uh, the like, I've been using Maya and rigging in Maya for 20 plus years. I know the guts of Maya very well, and it's taken a very long time for me to get that deep in it. But if I was to switch into another piece of software, it wouldn't be very long before I was able to, not to the level I am now, but I could rig a character before long. So there's definitely specific tools that you need to learn and knowledge, but I'd say a lot is transferable.
So a lot of it is really just figuring out what each program names the same tool that you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's still just trying to solve. I need a pivot, I need a control, I need some way of moving these things, and then figuring out how you do that becomes an easier task.
Nice. And then we have a few questions here regarding what you need to learn in order to become a rigger. So, for example, when you want to become a rigger, is it important to know how to model before so? Is it important to know how to animate? You mentioned knowing anatomy. Is it important to be able to understand anatomy and do figure drawing? Like, what are all these things in regards to the importance of becoming a rigger?
I think everybody's path to rigging is different. I've known riggers who were modelers first, and then they went back to modeling afterwards, and they knew how to model for deformation, which is a separate thing from sculpting and getting the shape. But now, how do I make it deform? I came at it from an art side of it, but I know a lot of really great riggers who came at purely from technical, and then they had to play catch up on the art side of it, that they didn't understand it. And there's just so much stuff that you can learn. There's so many different types of riggers out there. So I don't think there's any really prerequisite that you need to do before you start rigging. I think it's more, what do you already bring to the table, and then figuring out, okay, what stuff can I get into? If you've never done life drawing and you're a rigger, you would benefit tremendously from doing some life drawing and understanding, lines of actions and silhouettes. If you already have that, that's great. And you might not understand some of the technical stuff. So then you're learning a bit more of the technical. But yeah, there's sort of no right or wrong to learning how to be a rigger. I think it's more, how do you get over those barriers that might make you go, I actually don't like rigging. And anytime I've talked to someone who's like, I don't like rigging, I go, I bet I could show you how to get over those things where you actually start to really like it.
So, if you had to list like the top skills, like I want to be a rigger someday, what are the things that I should learn at some point? Uh, Maybe in a different order, but what are the key skills that I need as a rigger?
Uh, I mean, rigging is very much like there's a lot of knowledge to rigging. It's almost like being a mechanic or a doctor. Like there's so much that you can study. But to get into being a rigger, there's very little you need to learn to go like, oh, okay, now like what is your goal? Do I just want to do prop rigging because I'm an animator? I want to be able to do that. Do I want to be able to communicate with riggers as an animator? Or do I want to be able to rig my own characters, modeling them? I think learning more of the process, being a bit of a generalist, but then specializing in rigging makes you really strong at that. But yeah, I don't think there's anything that you have to be like. There's no one I think that they couldn't be a rigger. It's
Nice.
just sort of what type of rigor and it's really, are you enjoying it? If you can enjoy it, then you're going to keep learning. And if you're someone who likes to learn, like I always want to be learning new things and pushing the boundaries and playing around and being a mad scientist of, okay, I can come up with something new, cool. And I might find that someone else has done the same exact thing and same setup. They've just come to the same conclusion, but I didn't know that and I found it, and that discovery is so fun.
That's cool. And kind of on that question of discovery, we have a question here regarding auto riggers. There's a lot of auto riggers out there. When you're starting to learn rigging, is it good to just start with that, kind of play around with those, or is it better to learn from scratch on your own? And if there is an auto rigger, do you have any recommendations for someone who's interested in learning to play around with?
So I can kind of only speak to my experience, and I feel when I learned rigging in school, I didn't learn rigging from a rigger. I learned rigging from an animator and effects people. They didn't really know rigging. All they knew was here's the recipe, here's the steps, do this in this exact order. I remember doing like uh, reverse IK foot setup, and it made no sense. I was rigging it, I was starting from the basics and moving up, and I didn't understand it before I started creating it. And it took a very long time for me to understand it. Uh, and I didn't like rigging because I think I learned from the basics and kind of moved up. I feel like people enjoy it more if they can start to find a benefit from it. I think starting with an auto rigger is a better spot. And if you want to eventually go like, okay, I know what I like from this auto rigger and this auto rigger, I like this rig setup, or I've used this other rig and I really like how that control works. I really like the design. If you play around with a lot, then you get a better sense of taste of what you like. And then you can start learning, well, how do I make my own setups? How do I make that from scratch? How do I start with very simple things with some constraints? Oh, here's this new thing. And it's a bit like playing a video game where you learn a new skill, it opens up new territories, and you can choose which direction you start with in that case. But I would definitely say start with an auto rigger for full characters, because rigging a character from scratch is a very daunting task. Rigging a prop, you will still props actually um, when I train junior riggers, eventually what they do is characters, and senior riggers will do props because that's where the new stuff comes up. That's where there's a lot of new challenges versus rigging a character. It becomes very standard between characters.
Cool. So that kind of goes into another question that someone was asking here is you mentioned senior animators and junior animators and what you kind of assign to them. For someone who's just starting into rigging, is there any prop or object that you would recommend they start to rig or play around with first? So should they start jump into like you were showing bending an elbow or a hand, or should they be trying to do a simple baseball bat like you were showing? What would be a good place to dip a toe into the world of rigging?
So I think if you have a character that you're you're skinning it, skinning is a great place to start. When we're training our riggers, they spend the first week is learning to skin the body, a lot of times breaking bad habits or just learning new techniques for skinning the body. And then the second part is skinning the face, and then we're getting into blend shapes is sort of like the third week, and rigging props, setting up those things because we have an auto rigger that sort of comes later. Um, I think for artists moving into rigging, if they can learn to love skinning, then it gets really fun. But then starting with props, because I'm animating, I want to animate a thing. Okay, a sword, it's one. There's no deforming in it. If you get something that's a whip, where you actually have to put a joint chain in and have multiple controls, it gets a little bit more complex. I think going with simple prop rigging and getting gradually more complex, you'll have a good understanding under the hood, and then in parallel, learning skinning and deformation and blend shapes, and you get so you're not just fully technical, you're not fully on the artistic side, that you're juggling both.
Cool. And regarding the props you mentioned, the sword, we have another question here regarding the triple layer of controls you had. You had the three rings. Is there a reason why you set them all together at the beginning versus just putting them where you want the pivot point to be and just setting them along the length?
Yeah.
Just what is the process and the thought in there?
So in this case, I did it actually just to prove the point that you can do that. If I was rigging a car, I would not have put all the controls at the middle. I'd give way fancier controls so I can get drifting. I can do it from either side. That's getting into more complex things. Sometimes you don't know where the artist wants to grab that object, and if you can talk with the animator, if you know the storyboards and the scene in advance, then you can plan that out. Or if you're doing it yourself, you can pick where you want those pivots. So I generally I would maybe have one or two controls at origin, and then I'm picking a better pivot for sort of my main set of controls and main pivot for using it.
Cool. So for an animator, like you were mentioning, not where you might not know exactly where your character is going to hold it, instead of trying to be super picky about, well, like, where do I put this? Where do I not? You can just set it up at the base and then figure it out as you go along and not have to essentially add an extra layer of stress and hope
Yeah.
that you get it right.
Yeah, I'll just add those extra layers of controls because maybe they want to
Hmm.
constrain it, maybe they want to have two constraints. It's just with having at least three layers of controls, you get those options.
It is, uh, once you understand that, it takes a whole level of stress because I remember when I was a student first learning animation, every constraint and everything had to be perfect. And then halfway through the shot, I figure, oh shoot, my hand needs to be somewhere else. Destroy everything, reposition. That triple layer, yeah, you just move it and you're done and you're move along.
I
It's
just need
so
an offset. I just wish I had one more layer. And then if you set up with a locator and you've got everything working and you're like, oh, I wish I had one more layer, you can just group that locator. And then you've
yeah,
suddenly got a new pivot, a new layer that you can work with to add some offsets to some jitter or a different pivot point or something.
it it saves a lot of headache and a lot of gray hair in the long run. We have another question here regarding the posing of a rig. So there's been a few questions here about whether it's better to use a T pose or an A pose. And just for anyone who doesn't know what that means, when you're rigging a character, sometimes you're going to have the arms out straight to the sides, straight, there we go, straight to the side, which is T pose, or down at a 45-degree-ish for an A pose. So is there a preference? Is there one time that it's better to use one versus the other?
Yeah, so I definitely it is case specific. Sometimes I want A pose, sometimes I want T pose. If it's a cartoony character, I generally go to a T pose. If I'm trying to keep straight, like if you're doing a more realistic one, I might go A pose. So like I've got a shirt that's got these lines, and these lines are very specific that I want to be able to see it like that. So A pose. If I put it up and I've got it straight, and then I try and bend that down, it's really hard for me to get exactly sort of that. If you've got a jacket with sort of those squared off shoulders, then I'm always going to say I want an A pose because that's sort of the main way I want it. If I've got a character that I want them to be like noodly limbs, I want everything to be perfectly straight because it's really easy to bend something that's straight. It's really hard to straighten something that's already bent. So if you've got a very tube character, just keep everything straight. Feet pointed straight forward, legs straight down, everything as straight as you can. It looks very boring, and it can be hard to get approvals on showing that to clients when we're modeling characters and designing characters like super straight. So oftentimes we do a tech pass in modeling and afterwards straighten it to get to that. But yeah, the more sort of, if I want to maintain a line that's super straight, if that's really important, I'll go T pose. But if I've got a lot of detail in a jacket or something, then I'm going to go A pose.
Nice. And I think we have time for one last question. So regarding facial rigging, you showed a little bit on Tina, but when you're doing facial rigging, do you prefer to use bones or blend shapes to get all of the detail and control in a face? And are there times that one is better than the other?
So yeah, blend shapes allow you to really sculpt the detail in the pose, but that also takes a lot more time. If if I was working on feature film, I'd lean heavier towards blend shape driven, or it's just more joints, more complex joints. With the rigging that we do commercial rigging, we do games, we do some film, but it's mostly on kind of game, TV, commercial side of things. So for us, speed is really important, and we've got a setup that we've done it more joint based because that's much easier for us to put in and implement rather than trying to get exactly those shapes. And it also depends on how art directed a character is. So if it's very art directed, then I'm going to be hitting limitations with joint driven, and I want to be able to sculpt in those shapes. So things like just getting the crease here, we can't get that very well with joints. We always do corrective blend shapes on top of that. But the number of corrective blend shapes, then time required goes up, and on short timelines, you don't always have the luxury of sculpting everything, getting it just right.
So it's really just the project and the needs of the client, essentially.
Yeah, but I've seen fully joint driven ones and fully blend shape driven ones, and ones that work really well, and sometimes it doesn't. So there's kind of no wrong way to do rigging. It's not a rigging is a sort of a non-standard role, which is also kind of fun. That gives you a lot of opportunity to explore.
I have seen a fully boned facial rig that was just like every little detail. It just looked like a porcupine when you turned off the skin. It was just, I don't know how they did it, but it was a thing of beauty and horror at the same time. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for taking the time to do this. This was amazing, super appreciated. uh, a wellspring of awesome information and hopefully a jumping off point for a lot of you to at least explore and look into rigging. I, as an animator, I've looked into a little bit, learned a little, and I cannot express just how helpful it has been in speeding up my workflow. And I am like a sliver compared to Chris here, who is just like a master of knowledge in this area. So definitely, if you're interested in rigging, take a look at it, uh, explore that concept. It's a lot of fun. So, again, Chris, thank you so much for doing this. Now, for everyone here, there is a second segment to this. So, if you have any questions about Animation Mentor and the school, or just questions in general, we're going to have Tim and Mars jumping in here to take over and help out. But before we do that, I just wanted to take a little bit of time here again to say, Chris, thank you so much. It was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
Amazing
this
stuff.
was great. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, take care, Chris, and I'll see you around.
Thanks,
All
Chris.
right.
Now, Mars and Tim, I'll let you guys take the floor, take it away, and have fun.
Take the digital floor.
Yes, the conch is yours.
That was a lot. That was a lot of stuff. That's pretty cool, though. I mean, it was definitely something new for us because we do so many of these that are, you know, after that it's been done,
Right, right.
you know,
Yeah, later in the pipeline.
yeah, later in the pipeline. So it's really interesting to see, that sort of transpire, and, digital puppetry is much more than just characters, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's all the assets and things like that with the cube that he was doing. And so it's really, man, I found it to be quite interesting, to be honest with you. I was like, huh, look at that. I mean, and if you have kids, parenting is part of it. You heard it.
Bear tooth,
Yeah.
yeah.
You heard a lot about it, you know?
Well, I can't wait to see what you rig, Tim.
Oh my God, yeah, it's going to be absolutely fabulous. And you know, I'm from California, so a lot of the talks in there. I'd got up and done something for just a hot second. I forgot what I did something over there at the little video game console. I heard this big discussion of joints, and I'm like, holy smokes, what is going on in this? Oh, okay, I see what he's talking about. And I looked over, oh, I see what he's doing over there. So I had to put it to my speakers for just a moment. So
It's fun.
that's cool. And a big group of folks joined us for this thing.
Yeah, lots of folks for sure.
What's
That's
really
awesome.
cool is a lot of them were new
Yeah.
to to these workshops. So if you're new to these workshops, I tell you, the rigging one is just one of many that we've done that are absolutely fabulous. So Phoebe said she's new.
She's new. Yep.
So yeah, definitely check out. It's on our site, on our website, all of our past webinars or workshops. They're amazing that we're doing this kind of stuff for free with these workshops like this. So
Yeah.
super cool.
Yeah.
Colin's new as well. What's up?
Look
Welcome.
at lots of new folks. Awesome. Well, cool. Well, since you're new, let's talk a little bit about what Animation Mentor is.
Cool.
What is Animation Mentor? So, aside from doing these free workshops once a month that have been really awesome that Tim was talking about, we're an online animation school. We specialize in 3D character animation. We teach all kinds of different things, though. Although our specialty is 3D character animation, we cover
Yeah.
storyboarding and modeling and digital painting and visual development, all kinds of cool stuff. But yeah, and our mentors are going to be very similar to somebody that you'd find like Chris was doing today, and
Yeah.
they're going to be from Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks and other major studios, and what better way to learn from animation than from a professional that's working in the industry. So
Yeah.
that's a big part of it.
Yeah, agreed. And there's a lot of different things that you can do. Currently, we're not offering specific rigging course at AM. I say yet, right?
Yeah, I hear
Because
you.
you know what I mean? Because anytime we talk about that kind of stuff, all of a sudden we're like, we've manifested it, and it's like, wait a minute, we were just sort of talking about it. Now this thing is going on. So yeah, so a lot of stuff going on. Yeah, with our courses here, we do things so that students are putting together demo reels. So
Yeah,
certifications, although you do earn a certification, I'm answering a question that was in there. Oh, it was Verajitha, and I think I nailed that name, by the way.
I think you got that pretty
Feel
good. That
good
that
about what
was
I just said right there. We don't offer certifications for just individual courses.
right.
However, if you're completing all 6 courses of our character animation program or our
Game.
game character animation program, you do earn a certificate of completion. But I'll be honest with you, that stuff is cool, looks wonderful on in a frame. It's the demo reel.
Yeah.
That's what they
Look,
want to see in the studio world for sure.
look. Did you see that comment? They said, yes, you nailed
Oh yes,
it.
I see that. I'm digging on that. Yeah,
That's good.
Phoebe, we do work with Unreal Engine as a matter of fact. So yes, that's a good call by you. Yeah, we are working with that. Jay Sean, check in. What's up, Jay Sean? I know Jay Sean.
Yes, yes. Hive was asking, is there a tuition fee? Great question. So yes, so for the courses, both our 6-week courses and our 12-week courses, you do need to pay tuition. These are live courses as well, so very similar to what you'd see here today. In this workshop format, we have live classes as well. Like I said, we have 6-week classes, we have 12-week classes, and you do meet with a mentor live every single week. There's pre-recorded video lectures as part of your courses. And you are getting e-critiques or feedback
Yeah,
from these mentors on your assignments every single week as well. So yes, and tuition varies. It depends on if it's a 6-week shorter course. Ranges $6.99 to $8.99 US dollars. 12-week courses range from $12.99 to $24.99 US dollars. But what I always tell students, and I know you do too, Tim, talk to us. If you're
yeah,
if you're interested, and sometimes we're able to help out. Sometimes we have discounts available.
yeah,
We've got a discount on our Maya course. So if you're a complete beginner and you've never done any of this before, that Maya animation course is a great class to start off with. We've got some special discounts available for that class. And or if you're very, very experienced, maybe you've got some animation experience. And I was, checking out these comments here. There were several people that were either working in the industry or had years of experience already. We do have an advanced placement program. And so,
Yeah.
if you're interested in starting a little bit further than the basics, what you can do is submit your demo reel along with your application, and we can get that to one of our mentors, review that, and see, what's the best course for you to start off with based on your skills.
Yeah, I did see that as well. I mean, because the folks are sharing their stuff, their LinkedIn, their Instagram, things like that.
Yeah,
That's kind of how our animation mentor community also works as well, right?
that's a good point. Yeah,
There's so many people that are part of the AM community, not just this particular thread, but a lot of sharing of people's work, a lot of being able to give each other feedback and things like that. Imagine turning in, your weekly assignment to your mentor, and then they review it on Sunday and give you, and then they send you a video of them reviewing your work, showing you what looked good, what needed help, and how to fix those things. And then you go into the next week to do it again, meeting with them live during the week. And then a
mhm,
lot of opportunities to also drop into what are called dailies during the week, which is
yeah,
if you're already working in the studio world and you know all about dailies, they're going to be a
right.
big part of your life. But we have them here because we try to mimic what the industry does as closely as we can, because our school was founded by three wonderful, wonderful animators.
Yeah, exactly. I've got a couple questions popping into the Q&A panel here. Brooke is asking, or she said, I've taken the modeling class and had to drop out due to it being too complicated and not
Mm,
really teaching how to start more critique on your model. Will you have a modeling class that starts at the very beginning? So we do have the Intro to 3D Character Modeling class. I'm not sure if you're referring to that one, but Tim and I both tell students all the time, make sure you know your basics of Maya and know the basics of ZBrush before
yeah,
taking that class. And I think
for sure.
that can be really, really helpful. Um, cool. And then David was asking, is AM planning on offering a rigging course or curriculum? Tim had already addressed that. We don't know yet, but I would say stay tuned. Make sure you're checking the website, make sure you're following us on social, because one thing I know about Animation Mentor is when we come up with a new course, we do it right. We find
Man,
somebody, we find pros in the industry, and we listen to our community too, because remember Tim and I have been working here for a while. Tim's been working here longer than I have, but I remember before we had 2D courses here, but that came around because we've got feedback from the community. People are like, "Hey, when are you guys going to have a 2D workshop?
yeah.
When's that going to happen?" And sure enough, we found some of the best. We had Jay Jackson and T Dan here with us to help us with our 2D courses. So we've gotten that request from the community before, so it's definitely on our radar. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, they definitely help with the curriculum, even for that 3D modeling course. It was kind of like doing those surveys that we send out to the students to find out, hey, what can we do better? What would you like to
Yeah,
see us teach? And all of a sudden,
yeah,
all these things start happening. Our character design course, our 3D modeling course with Hong Chan from Blizzard. I mean, so a lot of these things kind of start to happen here at the school. So and Maya is kind of what makes this whole thing, click, right?
yeah.
So
You saw
understanding
Chris
Maya
too.
is a big deal. So because we
Hmm.
mainly do focus on character animation, actually movement of characters, understanding that side of Maya is going to be super important for you. The girl that was mentioning, the 3D modeling course, you kind of have to know Maya from the modeling side to really understand what's going on in the 3D modeling course. It's the
Right.
same thing over in the animation side, understanding the basics of keyframing and doing things like that,
Graph editor.
setting up constraints and
Hmm.
understanding a lot of those things are going to be really, really important. And so take that 6 week course of Maya to begin with, and it'll definitely set you up for success in our main animation programs.
Yeah. And speaking of that, what is it, June 18th? We're not very far away from the beginning of the next
Yeah.
round of classes. Our summer term starts the week of June 30th. So that's less than 2 weeks away. And it's not too late to get registered. You can sign up for those classes. You can send us a message if you're interested in finding out more. I definitely encourage you to do that. Yeah, that's going to be a great class. I think we're going to have a lot of people in there.
Yeah. Hava Martin, yeah. Do we have any motion capture related courses? Now, we don't do any mocap because we're an online school. However, within our game animation program, there is a portion of that course. I believe it might be class 5 within that, that they are doing some mocap, sort of they're
Oh yeah,
working with mocap from
GAO5.
some, yeah, yeah, exactly. GAO5, that they're working with some mocap stuff that was actually brought over from the mentor that teaches that course. So it's some stuff that probably came from Blizzard, I'm assuming. And so, yeah, there will be some of that in there, but we don't actually do mocap. It's kind of hard to do that as an online school.
Great question. So Ash is asking, is this Maya course that we're talking about always in summer? Like, is this course one time only or once every year? Great question. So we try to run every course every term for the most part. There's some exceptions, but we try to run those classes as often as possible. Our terms are 12 weeks and we split those in half too. So those 6-week courses will actually run twice per term in a lot of cases. So for the
Yeah.
Maya course, if you did that math right, you could take that up to 8 times per year.
Yeah.
So there's that, it's always available. So we've got 2 coming up in the summer term. We've got June 30th and I think what August 11th, I think it is.
August 11th, 12th,
Yep,
something like that.
and
Yeah.
something like that. And then the fall terms will still be 2 more. So there's still 4 more left in 2025, if you can believe that.
Yeah. Crazy. Paulina, this is kind of cool. She's been a Blender user since she was 12. It's a rough change to jump into Maya, but I know how to adapt to everything, so no problem. So all is good for now. Hey, Paulina, you should check out our other the other workshops that are on that link that was in there for webinars. It's on the site, but there's a cool one on there that is Maya for Blender users.
Ah,
So
that's
it's
good.
that sort of change,
Yeah,
from one to the other. So if you want to brush up on some of that stuff and pick up some of those skills in Maya that you're currently working with in Blender, check that thing out and then maybe jump
yep.
into our Maya course to sort of like even level that up if you want to.
Right. I sent that one to somebody yesterday. They're like, I've been using Blender for a long time. And actually they registered for Animation Basics starting in the summer term. Didn't really have much Maya experience, but I sent them that because they had 7 years of
Yeah.
Blender experience and then some tutorials. I think they're going to be
They
ready
just need
after
to kind of like,
connect the
draw the
dots.
lines from one
Yeah,
to
yeah.
the others.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I think they're going to do good. We got to check in next week to make sure they're ready for that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So Sean, just past animation basics, starts body mechanics in 2 weeks. Pretty
Nice.
amazing. I know that you learned a lot in that 12-week course, Jay Sean. So congrats to you for passing that course and then getting yourself all squared away for class 2. I can't believe it's going by that quickly already.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yuma is asking, is Maya really worth it? I'm using both Blender and Maya though. So, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not sure exactly what you mean if you're talking about price. You probably noticed if you checked out the pricing of Maya, it's pretty expensive. I don't, pretty straightforward with students. I tell students Maya is professional level software, so it's priced professionally. Good news though, Animation Mentor is actually an authorized Autodesk learning partner. What does that mean? We have our very own license server here. So if you're
Yeah.
enrolled in any of our 3D courses, we can provide Maya to you for free. So that's really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And Rebecca's right. Maya is industry standard.
Industry standard, yeah.
A lot of studios kind of adapted Maya and then, kind of like added a lot of their stuff to it, right? It's kind of like, hey, Mars gave me this great recipe for chicken soup. I added my own stuff to it. And now I call it this, but it's the same basic recipe. And so
Right.
there's kind of a lot of that stuff going on out there as well in the industry where people adding their own stuff. Um, I mean,
Maya Indie.
oh yeah, my
Yeah.
Indie's a cool version of it as well. And a lot
Yeah.
of people that I know did Indie because they weren't going to school and they
Hmm.
didn't have access to either that Maya license server that you were talking about or the student version of Maya, which in some cases people are able to get for 1 year for free.
Educational license. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is cool.
They've got you know what? I don't know if you know this, but they got a new verification process. I went through it with a student a couple of days ago. It's a little weird.
A
So,
little bit more strict, I'm guessing.
yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. I remember when they used to give 3-year licenses
I
out.
remember that. I
Yeah,
do.
now
Yeah.
1 year, cracking down, man.
But it is renewable though. So if you are enrolled in classes when that 1 year comes up, you can renew it for another year. So that is nice.
Yeah, yeah. There you
Um,
go. 2D animation, here to introduce some stuff in 3D. Good for you. Welcome to the dark side.
Nice. Uh, Luis is asking, do you offer rigging courses? So not at the moment, although we're really glad to have had this one. Like I mentioned earlier, stay tuned. It's definitely on our radar, but we do specialize in 3D character animation, both for feature film, TV, and video games.
Very cool. Ayush, right? Yeah, hi there. Great webinar. The information or the info was very beginner friendly. How do we recommend getting started as a mentor? Well, Ayush, I can tell you this. Our mentors have to have a certain amount of professional level work under their belt. So they
Mhm.
have to be folks that have been working in the studio world for many, many years, that have done work that we all recognize from, from DreamWorks and ILM and Weta and Pixar and Disney and Blizzard, and the list goes on and on and on. And so those are the type of mentors that we hire to teach classes for us. That's just from the professional level, but also we want to make sure that these are good people too. We want good
Yeah.
humans teaching
Right.
these courses as well. And
Totally.
because that's an important thing, right? And also in many cases, the list of mentors that teach for us have, all of this experience under their belt. What's funny is a lot of them are even graduates from our school.
I would say like close to half of them, right?
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
pretty phenomenal when you're like, look at all the movies this guy, has done. And then you look on campus, you're like, oh shoot, they graduated from here.
Right.
My
Yeah.
God,
That happens so often. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Or even just taking a class here too. It was funny. I was looking up Wayne Gilbert. That he wrote the book Simplified Drawing for Planning Animation, I think it's
Huh,
called. And I decided to search him on campus, and sure enough, he'd taken a class here.
that's
So
funny.
yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was pretty funny. Cool. What other questions do you guys have? Any other questions about Animation Mentor, how it works? How does registration work? Because if you guys don't have questions, me and Tim can talk forever.
Oh, dude, we're ramblers. I mean, it'll definitely happen for sure.
What is the whole application process for it, Tim?
Well, I tell you, the application part is free, right?
Ah,
So for students to
okay.
apply to the school, it's free. The classes are not, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, there's always a cost to be the boss, I guess you might say. And if you want to learn from people that are,
Right.
Disney people and Pixar people, we got to pay them, right? To teach you how to be them someday, right?
Right.
And so when a student applies to our school, we want the regular information, your name, your location, your phone number, your email, all that kind of stuff. But then we also want to know two important things. We want to know what's your level of Maya experience, right? We
Yep.
go from none, below average, average, good to the unicorn, which is excellent, right?
Excellent.
Very
Excellent.
rarely do people
Unicorn.
mark excellent, right? So we want to know what level of Maya you are at. Then we also want something that's super duper important, which is an essay. An
Yeah.
essay is a
What is that?
written statement
Ah,
that talks to us about one thing that could be all encompassing, which is, why do you want to become an animator?
why do you want
Right?
to do that?
Animation's about
Tell
storytelling.
us.
So we figure that you're probably not going to have too much trouble filling in the blanks on that. So we want you to write us a story on why you want to become an animator. Do your best with that, right? The AI stuff, we get a lot of AI essays that come through, and sometimes you might get 5 or 6 of them that are the same. Well, we like stories that are some sort of from the heart a little bit more,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Connecting things, that way is what we want to, maybe it's a movie that's inspired you, right? Maybe it's a
Right. Right.
book,
Yeah.
right?
Or a video
Maybe
game.
it's a relative, right? Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
We want you to tell us your story. Mars and I read every single essay that comes through, and we
Every single one of
determine
them.
whether a student is either going to be accepted or not be accepted to our school. But we do give you a chance. If we feel like, hey, you could probably write a better essay, we send you an email to say, hey, just brush up on your essay a little bit and send it to us again. And many people do. So
Yeah.
once we've accepted you to our school based upon your application, then we reach out to you to say, okay, here's your list of next steps. Do you
Yep.
need
Yep.
my what level are you at? Right. We want to go through all those things with you, answer questions about the tuition, help you set up payment plans, help you to choose a mentor for your time zone and kind of what you're looking to do, get you registered, set you free. And then, not totally set you free, because we're going to be watching all your work on student
Yeah.
campus anyway.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, now as a bonus to that, or not as a bonus, but in addition to the application, Mars
Yeah.
had mentioned it earlier. If you already have some prior experience and you're like, I don't want to start animation basics or maybe body mechanics, I think I've got enough skills to get into like the acting course or something like that, right? Do that same application, except check a little box that says, I would like to apply for advanced placement. That
Yes.
means we'll take your demo reel that you're going to copy and paste in there for us. We're going to send that to one of our mentors. They're going to review it. They're going to come back with a recommendation for a class that you should be starting out in. And then you're
Mhm.
also going to get some really killer feedback notes that
Yep.
talks to you about what happened, right? What
Yeah.
looked good? What didn't look so good?
I
How
needed
can we
work.
fix it? And
Yeah.
why animation basics or body mechanics or whatever it is the class that's going to best suit you.
Yeah.
And that's what
Yeah.
we do. That's what we
That's
do,
awesome. Yep.
you
Yep.
know?
That's great. That's perfect explanation of that. Thanks, Tim. Uh, Hadaya is asking, are there any discounts we can get on Animation Mentor? Normal, secret, and or special?
Oh, I like the
Um,
secret stuff.
Yes. Hadaya, what I tell students is talk to us. Talk to us first. We can let you know if there's anything special going on, if there's any discounts, if there's any secrets or any specials.
Yeah.
That's what I always tell students, families, parents. I say talk. Contact me before you sign up. Then I'll let you know what's available.
Yep. Cool. Take a look here. What else? Yeah. I mean, Philip, a 20-year-old master degree graduate amateur who didn't get to manage to master the basics to the full, right, to the full extent, I guess. I tell you what, Philip, this happens a lot, and in many cases this isn't your fault. This is, a lot of schools out there, right, that teach different things at different levels for animation. And you might find yourself at a school that's more of a generalist school that teaches you a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So it's hard to master one specific thing
Mm,
if they're teaching you like a bunch of different things in a short period of time. And
right,
kind
right.
of what we do as a specialized school, we're going to teach you to master those principles. And that first 12 weeks,
Yeah.
that's what we work on. It's
Yep.
12 solid weeks of nothing but those animation principles, right? And so a guy like you, it would be great to have you submit a demo reel for advanced placement to see exactly what areas you might be deficient at and how we could actually help you to get to that sort of that finish line, right? So
Yeah.
that
Or
happens all the time.
if you have an animation deficiency, we got the supplements to cure that.
We do. We do. We got all the supplements, the pre-workouts. We got it all.
It's funny. Hey, look, I think I got a point too. Hadaya in the comments here. How on earth does everyone on live streams manage to always pronounce my name right? I think I did good too. I got a
Dude,
point
I
too.
love that. So we're 2 for 2 on that. We had some good, nice work.
Maria's got a good question here. Is the beginner Maya animation course for 6 weeks different for game animation and movie animation, or
Good
is it
call.
the same course? Great question. So actually, so the answer is simply yes, it is the same for both. And actually, the first three 12-week courses in both the 3D character animation program for feature film and the game animation program, both of those three courses are identical. So those fundamental principles that Tim was just talking about, the 12 principles, body mechanics, advanced body mechanics, those are really fundamental courses for any type of animator, whether it's feature film, TV shows, video games, creature animation, game animation, any of those first, I guess, four courses, we'll say the Maya course, ANO1, ANO2, ANO3, are really vital fundamental courses. So yes, the beginning animation course is the same for both game animation and feature film animation.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, students that are more graduates, pardon me, that have come through our program really have a cool advantage, as well, because they can come back in, after going through all 6 of those courses in the character animation program and then jump over into game animation. And all they got to do is take those last three courses here, and leave with their certificate of completion as a game animator and as a character animator. And I mean, gosh, sky's the limit, you would think, you would hope.
Well, cool. Well, I think that takes us to about time. Thank you guys so much for joining. This has been a really awesome workshop. Kind of first of its kind. We haven't had a rigging one before, so it
No,
was pretty cool to see that. And you can already register for the next one. When's the next workshop coming up? breaking the when and how to push animation beyond reality. So
Oh, that's going to be pretty sweet.
and that's with Barry Rooney. So that's going to be a cool one.
That is going to be real sweet. That'd be a fun one. Not that this one wasn't, because Bo always makes them fun.
The hosts do most of the work.
Oh, yeah. Don't let Chris hear that. He's left. That's why you waited to say it until after Chris had left. Good call. He's going to watch this replay and go, come on. I did
To
all
be
the
fair,
heavy lifting.
you guys do all the work. Like Chris, the two of you, I'm just here to answer questions, ask them away, and there you go. My job is done. I've got the easy job here. I get to lay back and just soak in all the awesome knowledge.
He's totally a professional.
Hey,
Well, we are at time, unfortunately. Thank you again, Mars and Tim, for always jumping in here. It's always so much fun to hear you guys chatting and hear all the puns that come up during these. It's fantastic. And thank you all so much for jumping in, asking all of your awesome questions. It's always so much fun to see just how many people jump in here and sit through the whole thing. It's
All the way to
fantastic.
the end. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, all the
it's
way
an
to the
hour and a
end.
half, a
You guys
feature
are
length movie.
you guys are strong-willed, or you couldn't find the leave button on your.
Well, thank you all so much for jumping in. I look forward to hopefully seeing you in the next one, and we'll see you around.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
See you soon.
Bye, guys.
Happy rigging.
Bye.